Welcome back, guys. And today we continue our quest along the Elder Scrolls lore, which, might I add, is still extremely rich. We can go on forever. In the last video we talked about the 8 Divine. I mentioned a lot that there were 9. We shall be talking about the 9th Divine, that is Talos. Although everyone knows him to be Talos, that is not his actual name, that is his godhood name. That is the divine name given to him. He was not born with that name originally. You may know him as Tiber Septim, which was the beloved emperor of Cyrodiil. He's the one who united the entirety of Tamriel. But he's also not even that. That is not his true name. He actually has gone by Ysmer, which is spelled like this. You pronounce it any way you want. Also known as Dragonborn, the Dragon of the North, and his original name, Jalti Earlybeard. Now, Tiber Septim, or Jalti, was born in the island kingdom of Alcair. This was during the Second Era, the year 828. Just to clarify things, you actually keep track of those stuff. He had a brother named Agnorith, and if you don't know where this kingdom was, this was in the Skyrim area. Although it wasn't truly Skyrim yet. During this time, the Nords and the Bretons have been fighting for centuries along the northern border of Falkreath. You do know this from Skyrim. This is a kingdom in the Colovian Estates. At the age of 20, Jalti led the forces of Skyrim against the Reachmen of High Rock. To get your bearings, here's High Rock, which is in Hammerfell, and here's Skyrim. During those days, he met with Culcain, the king of Falkreath, who came to secure his northern border. They became allies, and Jalti was named general of his forces. Jalti was a shrewd tactician, and his small band of Colovian troops and Nord berserkers broke the Reachmen's line, forcing them back beyond the gates of Old Hurolden. A siege seemed impossible, as Jalti could expect no reinforcements from Falkreath, so he was on his own. During that night, a storm came and visited Jalti's camp. Hidden within the storm was Wolfharth, a long-dead Nordic king, who spoke to him in his tent and taught him the way of the voice. At dawn, Jalti went up to the gates, and the storm followed just above his head. He shouted down the walls of the Old Hurolden, and his men poured in. After their victory, the Nords called Jalti Talos, meaning Storm Crown. This would also go on to be called the Dragon of the North, because it's in Skyrim. Also Dragonborn. There were no dragons during this time, so if those of you that are thinking of the present day, I say air quotes around present day, Dragonborn, he had no dragons to kill, so they can never truly know. As you do know, the Greybeards are not all Dragonborn. They just learn the way of the voice. It takes forever, and that's where you can say he is a Dragonborn, because for someone to have a gift to be able to just understand the way of the voice, it's only through that. Culcain, which, as you know, the king of Falkreath, his intent was to crown himself the emperor of Tamriel, even though it wasn't united yet. But Jalti, or Talos now, for easier understanding, was still haunted by the prophecy given him by the Greybeards. Before Culcain could be crowned, Talos secretly murdered him and his loyalist contingent with the help of a High Rock Nightblade. The imperial palace in which they were living was burned to the ground in the action. This was to destroy any evidence, as it was known that Talos and Culcain were close. However, Talos just murdered him. So like I previously stated, this was to destroy any evidence. He didn't want anyone to rise up against him and kill Talos. So, in a way, as most people would understand, your first option would be to do what Talos did. Slit your own throat and make the suspicion off of him. The only problem with slitting his own throat is that he lived. Although his voice was no longer. He could no longer shout, he could no longer fight as with the way he did. The assassination was blamed on the Shah, and they are still within the Western Reach. To prevent Cyrodiil from falling apart again, Zurin Arctis, the Grand Battle Mage, crowned Talos as Tiber Septim, the new Emperor of Cyrodiil. In order to hide his involvement in the assassination, there was a lie that Tiber's own throat was cut. This was like a joke. Although it was a lie, it was true. After capturing the imperial throne, Tiber Septim found that he wanted to unite all of Tamriel. This would prove to be a very time-consuming task. He sent his old ally, Ysmer, to deal with the imperial expansion into Skyrim and High Rock. Ysmer, mindful that it might seem as if Tiber Septim is in 2 places at once, worked behind the scenes. This is why, in the beginning, I referred to as Tiber Septim, Talos, Dragon of the North, or Ysmer. That was because he worked under that name and didn't classify himself as another person. He wanted to make it seem as though Talos was here, there, everywhere. That's what gave him that godlike status. The human kingdoms were conquered, even Hammerfell, which was the one they were at war with for centuries originally. After sending the commander of the new West Navy, Amiel Reichton, to Stros Mackay, the Battle of Stros Mackay had begun. Richton's assassin Dram shot a poisoned arrow at Hammerfell's Prince Ator, killing him and defeating the last of the crown resistance. After this, Tiber Septim appointed Amiel Richton as provisional governor of the island. Ysmer had wanted a complete invasion of Hammerfell, allowing a chance to battle their foreign wind spirits himself. But Septim refused. The Emperor, Tiber Septim, had already made a better plan, one that would seem to legitimize his rule over Hammerfell. Cyrodiil supported the losing side of a raging civil war, and were invited into the rule of Hammerfell. Finally, the Empire could turn its eyes to the Elves, the other half of Tamriel. Ysmer continued to impress upon Tiber Septim the need to conquer Morrowind. The Emperor was unsure that it was a wise idea, hearing word of the Tribunal's power. The Tribunal, also known as the Almazivi, or the Three, were the ruling gods of Morrowind and the Dunmer people from the First Era all the way to the late Third Era. The members of the Tribunal were Vivec, Amalexia, and Solthasil. Ysmer, seeking his vengeance, reminded Tiber Septim that he was fated to conquer the Elves, including the mighty Tribunal. Septim's battle mage Arctis advised against the move, but the Emperor wanted the ebony in Morrowind, which had plentiful in it. He needed the source of capital to rebuild Cyrodiil after 400 years of war, which had absolutely destroyed the entire city. The ebony would prove to be a very strategic resource, as it is very strong. As you do know, it is late game armor, so the strength of ebony would prove to be very useful. Ysmer came up with the idea that with the Tribunal dead, Septim might steal the Tribunal's power and use it against the Altmer. The Altmer were the Elves, also known as the oldest enemies of Lorkhan. But Alinor, which is now known as the Somerset Isles, was the furthest thing from Septim's mind. Even though he was planning to send Arctis to the King of Alinor to make peace, in the end, the need for ebony was a determining factor. The Empire invaded Morrowind, resulting in the Tribunal's surrender, when certain conditions of the armistice included not only a policy of non-interference with the Tribunal, but by extension a validation of religious beliefs. Ysmer was furious and abandoned the Empire completely. With Ysmer's leaving, all Septim's ideas of conquering Tamriel had vanished. He decided to turn his forces to Cyrodiil and the human nations who were now already under his control. Now, taking this a gear down from the fast-paced war, the great Dunmer general, Symmachus, a friend of Tiber Septim's, brought a woman named Baronzia to the Imperial City, where she met the Emperor and they fell in love. The Emperor of Baronzia engaged in an affair, but it was soon discovered that Baronzia was pregnant. As most men do, he determined that this was not allowed. This would prove to be a threat to his son's dominion, and so ordered a healer to force Baronzia to miscarry. Baronzia was dispatched from the Imperial City very soon after this. Moving forward, to know more about Tiber Septim or Talos in general, he was always fascinated by the Dwemer. After their victory in Morrowind, he ordered Xur and Arctis to research the Dominium. This was the grand artifact of the Dwemer Tiber received from Morrowind as a gift from Vivec. Now, the Numidium is a very, very strange and powerful thing. I'm surprised he actually received it as a gift, let alone even received it at all. It is also known as the Brass God or Brass Tower. It is a colossus humanoid golem of the Dwemer civilization. For out-of-lore context, the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall and the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind are the only games to involve the Numidium, or at least its concept. Now, because we have all the time in the world, I'm going to tell you about the Numidium, because it is very important to the story and to Elder Scrolls in general. Now, the Numidium was constructed by Kagranak, a Dwemer tonal architect during the First Era. Just giving you the idea of how old this thing was. Keep in mind this is the first Numidium, also known as the Anuminium. They must sound the same when I say it, but let me tell you the spelling is different. There are many theories as to why this was built. The original power source was the Heart of Lorkhan, whose power the Dwemer had accessed using Kagranak's tools. And this was the one that was gifted to Tiber Septim. Now, one thing I'm going to leave off on with that is that the Numidium needed the Heart of Lorkhan, like I just said. However, no one has the Heart of Lorkhan. Only the Dwemer did, and the Dwemer are no longer. So what was going to be needed to power the Numidium? And that is the problem that Tiber Septim had. But moving back to the story, when Tiber Septim first received the Numidium, He discovered the reason the Numidium was made and some of its potential power. Most importantly, he learned that Ysmir's place in the war of the long ago. Arctis believed he could activate the artifact, was working from incomplete plans. Thinking of the heart of Lorkhan's body was needed to power the Numidium, and only that. While Arctis reported about his discovery, the prophecy of the Greybeards finally became clear to Tiber Septim. The Numidium was the one thing he needed to conquer the world. It was his destiny to have it. The heart of Lorkhan was lost in their cause, but there was another source who could make the Numidium work. Ysmir. The Emperor contacted Ysmir and saying he was right along about Morrowind. They should kill the tribunal for Septim, realizing the true danger of Dagoth while Ysmir was away. They needed to get together and make a plan, as Septim was also in need of an army. When Ysmir arrived, he was ambushed by Imperial guards. As he took them on, Zurin Arctis used a soul gem on him. With his last breath, Ysmir's heart roared a hole through the battle mage's chest. With everyone dead, Ysmir gone to ash. Tiber Septim, as you could tell, the scene was probably very gruesome. The assassination was successful, however, everyone died in the meantime. Tiber Septim took this soul gem of his once good friend, for knowing that Ysmir's heart was, I guess, pure enough to power the Numidium. When the Elder Council had arrived to investigate, he told them about the second attempt on his life, this time by his trusted battle mage, Zurin Arctis. He blamed, saying that Zurin Arctis had planned a coup against him, to overthrow him and take the crown. However, as you do know, that was not the actual case. Arctis was always on his side, and now he was dishonored. But that's irrelevant, that happens all the time in history. One good thing, I guess, to come of it was he had the Dead Guards celebrated as heroes, the ones who had stopped him. And as for the Ash, well, no one really knew what the Ash was. Following this event, Tiber warned Cyrodiil about the dangers within. He said he had a solution to the dangers without. The Numidium. While not the god Tiber Septim and the Dwemer hoped for, it served its purpose. Like I previously stated, Ysmir's soul was not as strong as Lorkhan's, with any reason to believe that it would be. Lorkhan was the all-great trickster, the one who preceded the divines. After he defeated the rulers of Somerset Isles, a new threat had appeared, a rotting undead wizard who controlled the skies, Zurin Arctis, a reborn as the Underking. He blew the Numidium apart, but it pounded him into the ground with its last spasms, leaving only a black splotch. The Numidium fell into the sea, seemingly forever. Now, Tiber Septim's reign stretched from the Second Era 854 and lasted all the way into the Third Era 38. One thing to keep in mind is that the reason his reign stretches over from Second Era to Third Era is because he is the reason the Second Era ended and the Third began. As soon as he united the entire continent of Tamriel under one banner, the Septim Dynasty, this started the new era. This was a reign that lasted 81 years. You heard me correctly, 81 years. He lasted all the way until his death, and is believed that he ascended to godhood. He became Talos again in death, the god of war and governance. For after the lifetime of war, he had united Tamriel for the first time in history, and upon ascension, the 8 divines became the 9. Now you're wondering, is that the only reason why Talos ascended? Is that even possible to ascend just because he united everything? It's like you get an achievement for unlocking the Empire of Tamriel. Well, I guess. In the eyes of the people, it was something that had never been done, and of course they must be praised. Think of people that have lived and died in real history. A name that comes up would probably be Julius Caesar, leaving such a mark on history that the entire title of emperor changed into being Caesar. Or there is another way, which is called mantling. In a way, Talos ended up becoming not his own god, but he ended up impersonating another. You remember Lorkhan? Yeah, he ended up probably mantling Lorkhan. What does that mean? What does mantling mean? Mantling is impersonating someone publicly so much that you cannot see a difference between the two. Although, through mantling, you do not lose your own identity, people just simply don't know what the difference is. In a way, the universe didn't know what the difference was. If Talos truly did ascend to the Aedra, it could be due to the fact that the universe could not tell the difference between him and Lorcan, which was a deity. Now this might not be true, but let's just continue down the rabbit hole. He campaigned his entire life around Tamriel with the Numidium, which was originally constructed to draw power from the heart of Lorcan. But he wasn't taking that power from Lorcan, instead he was taking the power from the Mantella, which was the soul gem taken from Ysmir. It's possible that he spent so much time around and controlling the Numidium's power that it was enough for him to effectively mantle Lorcan, or become him, taking his place among the 9. And why do I say take his place among the 9? There was always 8, there wasn't 9. Well, Lorcan was always a deity. He is there, he is a person, or he's a god, but he was never recognized as a divine. So when Talos was raised up to the divine, he became the 9. Sorry with all the rhymes. In a way, there have always been 9 divines, there was just only recognized to be 8. And Talos was now the one thing that was able to recognize them. Or maybe it was just the people thinking that he was such a great person, reuniting everyone, living in a world of peace, and causing so much great things to be accomplished that he was just given the word Aedra and rose him up to the 9. That is why he's not completely accepted. That is why, the events of Skyrim, he is banned. He's not actually fully recognized. That is why the guy inside of Whiterun is screaming at the top of his lungs about Talos when he's no longer allowed to be spoken of. Or maybe he actually is real, and he's a divine, and he is there. But is it actually him? Or is it Lorcan? Now let's stop talking about Tiber Septim's perceived godhood. Whether it is, whether it isn't, it doesn't really matter. Let's talk about something we can actually see within the world of Elder Scrolls. His legacy, or his bloodline. Is it actually still going on? You yourself in Skyrim were Dragonborn, so it is possible you were related to Tiber Septim because he is of Dragonborn. But you're not going to be related to him exactly. You see, Tiber Septim's bloodline went extinct in the main line with the death of Pelagius Septim. This was due to an assassination attempt in the year 41 of the Third Era. It is a tragedy, but it happens. The line did switch to Pelagius' cousin, Kintra, and her heirs, who were the descendants of Tiber Septim's brother, Agnerith. So it wasn't pure, it didn't come from Tiber Septim, it was of the same family, the same blood. Traveling down all the way to the end, you meet with the last true bloodline with Martin Septim. Now, that name may or may not sound familiar. If it does not sound familiar, just play the first 10 or so minutes of Oblivion. This is the Emperor during that time, and he pretty much just died. He had no heirs, and thus ending the Septim dynasty. With the death of Martin Septim ends the Third Era, and the new one dawns. That the Septims were Dragonborn line of the Emperors, the ending of the bloodline fulfills the prophecy of the Elder Scrolls that foretells the return of Alduin and the coming of the last Dragonborn, which are the events of Skyrim. But anyways, that's been it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully I made this as long as possible to get as much information in as possible, because Talos, or Tiber Septim, or Ysmir, or Dragon of the North is a very interesting character. He has appeared in every single Elder Scrolls game, and it seems to be that he won't stop until he's appeared in every game ever made. His name will also come up later in events called Landfall. That's for another time. Anyways, like I said, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Later, adventurers.